All right. So this is sort of the third and final of the basic training. So people watching this would be either brand new to Dynamics because they have just started using it as an agency, or they have come in to join Big Brothers Big Sisters as a new service delivery staff, and this is probably one of the training components as you get started in your role. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to focus on a lot of the extra stuff. So today we've talked a lot about all the core functions of a service delivery staff in terms of what are contacts and what are inquiries and how do you deal with putting those in the system and managing them through the system and all of that stuff. And so today we're going to focus on some of the extra features that you're going to want to learn, but you may not necessarily use at your agency. These are sort of extra features that are agency decisions to whether or not you want to use them. And so I'm just going to get this to sign in, sorry. So you're going to want to talk to your staff at your office, or if you're a brand new agency, you're going to discuss as a staff about how you would use a lot of these features, if any. Sorry about this. We just got to set this up. I don't know why this hasn't been set up yet. All right, and we're just going to jump into CRM. All right, so we're going to talk a lot about a lot of the basic stuff. So we're going to talk a little more in depth about these dashboards that we see when we first log in, and we're going to talk a bit about some of the system navigation pieces, some of the tricks about using that navigation, filtering data. There's a whole bunch of stuff, but we're going to cover all of it at a very high level. So we're not going to jump right into detail in terms of how do I make a dashboard, or we're going to talk about Advanced Find, which is like a reporting tool. We're not going to go into a tutorial about how to use it. I'm going to give you a high-level overview of what it is. And the reason for that is pretty much everything you're going to see today, there's far more information in more compact training sessions specific to the features that we're going to talk about. And so we're going to show you what those are today. When you feel like you're at a point you can use them or your agency uses them and you're ready to jump into them, then you can go and you do the other training material that's on the member site. And if you're not sure what the member site is, ask your office, because that's a common Big Brothers Big Sisters sort of network site that you can all log into. Each agency has access, and there's all kinds of resources for everything Big Brothers Big Sisters, but there's a whole section specifically for Dynamics CRM. So the first thing we're going to start with is more so some of the navigation, and this is a bit of a refresher. Hopefully you've sort of caught on to this, but understanding that navigation bar is always up at the top. And the one piece that we sort of recap in this session here is just what happens when you're going into a file and how do I get to certain parts of the file. And so I'm going to just open up any one of these test files. And as I do, just a reminder that anytime you go into a file and you get their name up top, this little arrow is really that we talked a lot about the binder and the dividers and stuff like that. And so that's really what this is. This is opening up that binder and seeing all the different dividers about all the different things in the file that you need to or may want to look at some point down the road. So that's just a reminder in terms of navigation. Another quick thing that I want to point out is around clicking in the system. And this is because this is probably one of the pieces that takes people the most getting used to. And we've made some improvements over the last few months just to try to streamline some of it a little bit, but people often get confused with what do I need to single click and what do I need to double click in the system. And so there's a technological explanation, which I will spare you, but the improvements we've made have really been done to help ensure that primarily when you're opening a record, you just need to single click in the system. And the biggest reason for that is you'll notice here, if you look at on the screen, the cursor, the little arrow I have is just that, it's an arrow. And so if I click something, nothing really happens other than selecting that record. But you'll notice as I move over a person's name, or any name, that it turns into a little finger. And so this is consistent with pretty much every website on the planet, in that when you're on a website, when you hover over something that is a hyperlink that will take you somewhere else, your cursor is going to change a little bit. And that's common. Like I said, that's very common on a lot of websites. Sometimes you'll notice that they're highlighted a different color, they're underlined. There's something about a certain word or something in a phrase or something on a button that indicates to you that this is something I can click. And when you click it, you don't have to double click those. You just click them and they take you to that new place. And Dynamics is very, very similar. So right now, when I move, all I'm doing is selecting a record. I don't have a little finger. There's nothing on this space where I am right now that indicates to me that if I were to click this, it's going to take me somewhere else. But the name, as I hover over it, it turns my cursor into a little finger. It also underlines that, and that's sort of that universal indication that this is a hyperlink. And what that means is if I click this, it's going to open the record. And so it opens it up. It brings me to that record. Whereas when I was clicking on the nothingness on that line, it just selected that record, saying, okay, here's the one you want to pick. So clicking is something you kind of have to get used to, but we've tried to streamline it so that in as many places as possible, and that's, to be clear, that's not all places, but as many as possible, when you're opening a record, you just have to single click the name of that record or the name of the person or the as you'll see in a minute, the name of the actual record. So I'm going to give you a good example as we go into screening. And so we're going to see here I've got the name of these, and then I've got the screening activity. And you'll notice as I hover over these other fields, they're not highlighted, right? They're not highlighting, they're not underlining, my cursor isn't changing. But as soon as I get to the name of this screening record, I can see it says Ann Ant or Ann Art and screening outcome, or application, or fitness to mentor. And that comes up in a little tag, a little gray tag over top. When I click that, it's actually going to open that screening record like this. So clicking, again, something that has caused a lot of frustration, particularly people who are in and have been using the system since inception, like since we started using it, or have joined anytime prior to the last few months. Clicking has been really, really confusing because sometimes you double click, sometimes you single click. But moving forward, really understand that really all you're looking to do is click something once. Also want to point out about matches because this is a really, really common error, and it has to do with that whole double click, single click bit. But when you're opening a match, you have to keep in mind that matches are technically two parts. So if you go back to our session on making matches and how that all works, what we got into talking about is that analogy of a basket and how you build the basket and then you put the people in it. And so when we're doing that, we're actually dealing with two different records in the system. There's that match shell or basket, and then there's the grouping of people we're putting in it, whether it's two people because it's a big and a little, or a mentor-mentee, or because you're putting in one by one as a group, right, and you're putting a bunch of people into that. But when you're doing that, you're dealing with two different kinds of records. And so when we're opening a match, you'll notice again, as we just talked about hyperlink, I can click on this match number and it's going to open up the match record. It's really, really important that you understand that you always single click, as I just said. Pretty much all records in the system, when you want to open them, you single click. So this is one where you have to single click this record. And the downside here is that if you accidentally double click and you forget that, it is going to open up another record, but you're actually in the wrong place. And so we're not going to go into detail of what that is. What I'm going to show you is what it needs to look like when you get to the right place. I'm not going to show you the wrong one because I don't want you to get confused the two. I'm just going to show you that when I open a match, I'm going to single click this match number, and it's going to open up that match shell or that basket that we talked about. And you can recognize that you're in a basket. There's a couple different ways. Number one, the match number is right at the top. So that's your very first indication, is if that match number is not really big and right here in your face, right at the top, then you're probably in the wrong place. The other thing is you can see what program it is, what status this match is. If you scroll down, you can see when it was made, what some of the dates are. You can see a bunch of information about the match. What you don't see here, clearly, are the participants' names. Okay? And so because you can't see their names right from here, you have to go into that binder and say, I got to see who's in this match, right? So you can see view plus, as in add, /view match members. And that'll just take me to the screen that shows me that inside of this basket we have the following participants. Okay? So keeping in mind that we are always single clicking those matches. Like I said, I'm not going to go back and show you what it looks like when we click the wrong type of match. Or click the match incorrectly and open up the wrong kind of record. I just want you to make sure and really kind of ingrain in your own mind that when I'm opening a match, I single click that match number. and you'll read it in the manual several times. You'll hear me say it on other training videos. We really emphasize that you have to single click the match number. Okay. So I also want to talk a bit about filtering, and we're going to stay right on this page. Filtering is a way of doing just that, right? Filtering data. Anybody who's used Excel or even Access, if you've pushed it that far, you know that you can use the filter to really narrow down the data you're looking at. And so that's really, really helpful in situations like where perhaps you're looking at all your matches, right? So here I'm looking at the view that says My Active Matches. So these are all the matches that I have in the system. And of course, we're in a training site. But when I open up the filter, or I click on the filter that's located on the right-hand side where I just hovered over, there's a little funnel, it looks like, right? So we can filter this data. And when I click on that, you'll notice that now on every column in this view, I have the ability to drop down a little menu. So let's say that I come in one day and somebody walks in and says, hey, I've got tickets to this thing. I know it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon right now and this thing starts at 6, but it's some kind of a spa thing going on, and so I'm sure some of the big sister, little sister matches would love to go. So you really quickly need to take your caseload and look through who are the big sisters and who are the little sisters, like what are those matches, right? You're not looking at Go Girl, you're not looking at ISM or Big Brothers. You just need to see your matches that are big sisters. Okay? So we can use the filter to come in here and filter by specific program. So I've clicked the little filter, little arrow here, filter by specific program. It then brings me to a list where I can select all of the programs on my list. I'm going to say Big Sisters. I clicked on that. You can click Select. So make sure it's brought down here. Click Add. And what will happen is this list is now filtering based on my selection. Here's all my big sisters, and I can say, oh, you know, Annette and I were just chatting about that the other day, that Hannah has never had a spa treatment. She would love this. Let's call her and see if she can make it. Right from here, I can click into Annette's file. I can see her phone number, give her a call, and see if she wants those tickets. Okay, so just to jump back to that filter for a minute, we've got a filter. Now you can do this for multiple programs. So you can see right now it's got just Big Sisters. I can actually say filter by specific program, and I could also add in, maybe you did want to, maybe it was something else that you could extend to Go Girl somehow. I can include that in my filter, and I now am going to see Big Sisters and Go Girls, but none of my other matches are here. Okay, so the filter is really, really handy. You can use it in a variety of places. It doesn't just have to be used here. We can reset this filter. You don't just have to use it on matches. You can use that on contacts, right? A common one there would be I need to filter my entire caseload just for the people who actually have an email address, because I need to send them an email through CRM about something. And so you can put on that filter, say where email address contains data. So I'll show you what that looks like with contacts. So here we've got a list. I can turn on that filter. I can see the email column, and I can see I want all the ones that contain data. Or perhaps you want all the ones that don't contain data, right? So there's contains data, contains no data, or you can build a custom one. I'm going to say contains data because I just want the people who have an email address. You'll see all the people that have a blank spot here are going to disappear when I click that. Here I've now got a list very quickly of all the people who actually have an email address. Okay, so explore filtering. Filtering is a really, really functional tool for looking at and finding information just like that very, very quickly. Another thing that you may want to make use of at your agency is additional services. So additional services is something that is used for just that, for all of those extra features or those additional service pieces. And so I'm going to open this up, and we'll see some example ones here. Again, we're in a training site, so these are just examples. But you can see some of the examples of what people have done. We've got a June Big Bunch group. We've got a Lunch and Learn at Sun Life, a summer picnic, a Home Depot craft night. So agency events, whether they're coordinated third party, like a Home Depot calls you and says, hey, look, we're having a kids event. Why don't you bring some of your kids over? So you don't really have to do anything. You just have to put out the word and go. Or it could be something a little more complex, like the summer picnic that you're planning and facilitating the entire thing. So either way, you can put those kinds of events in the system. And so let's open up this summer 2013. Actually, let's open up the Home Depot craft night. I can open up this event, and I'm going to see some basic information about it. So when is it happening, right? Start and end date. What kind of event is this? So what kind of service? Is it an agency event, a camping thing, a community compute? There's all kinds of stuff in here that you can pick from. We can put in a little description of it. We can make some other notes. So you can see that there's some basic fields here. I'll let you kind of peruse these on your own in the training site, but you can go through this and see what information is tracked here and what you can put in. But where it gets really, really functional is I can open up my sub navigation for this specific event, and I can see that there's a spot to put in contacts. So what this allows me to do is see all of the people who are registered for this event. So I can see we've got lots of volunteers, but we only have a couple of kids. So perhaps I call a couple of more, and we add a couple into the list. So I'm going to do just that. I'm going to add an existing contact to the list. I'm going to use the lookup because I'm not familiar with a lot of the kids in here. If you knew the name, you could just type name here, and it would find that person. I don't remember a lot of the names, so I'm going to go ahead and use the lookup feature. And I'm going to say I need to find more records. I'm going to look at just the kids. And so let's say that Peter Pan and Blue Jay and Mona Lisa and Miss Lulu, they could all attend. So I've added them. I see them all here. Notice in the grayed out background, you can't really see it now, but it says 1 of 8, which means there are 8 people are registered here. I'm going to go ahead and pick these people, and I'm going to say add, and all of a sudden my registration list is 8. It climbed up to 12 because now I've got Peter Pan, Miss Lulu, and whoever else I forget the other one I added. So they're all now added on the list. So this is functional because I can keep this list here. I can see who's coming to these events and what's going on, right, from an agency events perspective. But what's really quite amazing is if I open up one of these files, so let's go into Miss Lulu's file for a minute. Not only can I see that she's part of this event and I can see her amongst all the other participants, but if I go into Miss Lulu's file, I can now open up this, and inside of her file, one of those binders, or dividers rather, is additional services. So if I want to see what events she has done, and I'm dealing specifically with her because I'm in her record, I can actually navigate over to additional services, and it'll show me any of the events that she's participating in. So in a second, this is going to load, and it's going to show me that she has attended the Home Depot Craft Night. And so that's great from a summary perspective if you're doing what's a good example? CIBC application, for instance, or one of the Youth Vision scholarships, and they want to know some of the things that this person has done with your agency and are they actively involved. This is a great spot. If you're using this part of the system, this is a great way to summarize all the things that this individual has done. Some other agencies use this to track like big bunch groups you saw on the list, so they track involvement in those. They also track participation in some of the other events that they run at the office. So it might be a fundraising event, but they also want to track some of the contacts that maybe have come out to support that, right? Sometimes people will do a gala event, and at that gala they'll have a big and a little come out and speak, or at a golf tournament, and so they can put that in here and track who it was that came out to that event. Okay? So that's additional services, really, really functional. Something that I would recommend agencies use, because I often hear that they struggle to. Agencies are like, we got this binder and we keep track of who came, and we got sheets, and we got to bring everything with us, and it's complicated, but we don't have that data in CRM. So if I want to go back and look at who participated in what, I either have to put a case note in there that they did, or I have to go and look through the binder and find their name on every event that they went to, which would take a long time. This allows you to put that information in the system, have it right there, and be able to see exactly what somebody did. All right. So the next piece I want to talk about is getting into what's called advanced find. And so again, this is just a very high-level tutorial. There is much more in-depth training. We're actually I'm doing a number of different sessions at convention. This year, in 2014, when the video is being shot, we're doing 2 sessions on advanced find, one basic introduction and one a more advanced version of advanced find. And so what I'm going to do here during this video or this training is really just to show you what this tool is capable of. We're not going to go into a lot about how to actually build them and what some of the logic is, because there are training tutorials online as well as sessions that we're recorded for advanced find. There's an actual video that's about 15 minutes, talks about how to build an advanced find. So I'm going to show you just the basics in terms of introduction. So what I'm doing is I'm opening up this other tool, and so Advanced Find is just that, right? It's an advanced way of finding data. So I showed you filtering, and that's a handy way to find information in the system. But Advanced Find really kind of takes that up a notch because it allows you to filter on all kinds of different criteria, not based on just the view, but you can actually find very specific things. So I'm going to show you a sort of a staggered approach to how we might do one of these. So Advanced Find is made up of two parts. There's the criteria. So this is how we find the data. And then once we tell the system how to find information, we can also then go and tell it what information we want to see about what it has gone and found. So that'll make more sense as we go through the process. What I'll show you right now is we're saying look for contacts, which means it's looking for people, right? I'm not going to put in any criteria. And because I'm not putting in any criteria, it's going to return for me every single contact in our training site here. And if you were to run this at your agency, it would do this for your agency. So you can see here at the bottom, we've got 262 contacts coming back, right? So down here, it's showing us 1 to 250 of 262 total. Now again, that's all contacts. There's no criteria entered here. I have filtered that data on absolutely nothing, which means it's grabbing all of it. Now I can start to filter that down. The first thing I'm going to do is, let's say that we want only volunteers. So I'm going to specify that I want only volunteers. And again, I'm not getting into the logic of what these things mean because the training resources talk about that. I'm just showing you that we're going to filter on volunteer. And so our 262 all of a sudden turns into 174. Right? So we just shaved almost 100 people off that list because they weren't volunteers. Now, let's go back. I'm going to say, actually, I only need the male volunteers. Okay, so same idea. I've now said go find contacts, but only find the ones where they're a volunteer and their gender is male. So my list of 174 now turns into 74. So we literally just shaved 100 people off the list. So you can see how quickly we're narrowing things down, right? And we can take this as far as we want. So we could say, I want to see only those where the email contains data, right? So now I'm saying all people, look for volunteers who are male that have an email address. That list of 74 now turns into 38. Okay, so I'm just going to leave it at that for now, just because that's just an example of how it works. That's an example of how the how part works, right? This is how the system needs to find the data. So you have complete creative control here over how to find information on whatever query you want. You can build these however you wish. What you can do next is there's an Edit Columns button. And Edit Columns allows you to edit the columns, as crazy as that maybe sounds. So I can open this up, and when I do, I'm going to see that it's showing me the full name, right, which is what we were seeing when we were getting those results a minute ago. And so I can, instead of just having that, I can say, well, I actually need to see a little bit more information. I need to see their age, and I need to know if they are, what's another good example? Let's just say I need their home phone number. I'm just going to keep this short. Maybe we want to see their employer if it's filled in, and I also want to see, why not their ethnic identity? Maybe I'm running a report for a grant, and home phone. Where's home phone? Right there. So I've picked a few different fields, and when I say OK, you'll notice that these items have now been added to the list. We can toggle these around. We can change them. So I'm going to say I want that only to be that big, and I want employer. I want the phone number actually right there, and I want age there. I want to switch these two around. So you can see I can move things around. We can make them bigger or smaller, however we want. You've got lots of creative control in here. Now that I've set all of this up and I say, okay, now when I hit results, not only do I see the list of names, but I also see all the other information. So this now gives us really nice access to data exactly the way you want to see it. Every one of you as a user, no matter who or where you are, have the ability to go in and customize these views and build them to your own specifications. Right? So you can customize your own personal views, and you can say, well, I need to see all my people who live in a certain area or a certain city or who are between a certain age or whatever the case might be. You as an individual user have that capability through Advanced Find. We can also save these, and when we save them, if I go ahead and save this and we say it's, let's call it male volunteers with email address. I'm going to say OK or save. And now that I've saved that, if I actually come back into contacts, so if I just go away for a minute, go to something else, come back to contacts, that view is now going to show up on my list. And so it's right here. You can see I've done this example a few times. So I put male volunteers with email address. If I open this up, you now see that not only is it showing me the list, but it's now showing me all the fields that I asked it to show it. Okay. With this, of course, gives you the ability to structure this however you want. So you can save as many of these views as you want. You can see that the system views are in the top. The My views, which are the ones that I've personalized and built myself, are at the bottom. You can see I've got a whole bunch of them here from the training site. You can build these as often as you like. It doesn't matter how many you can have, as many as you want. As far as I'm aware, there is absolutely no limit on the number of views you can have. Okay? So you can build them and get exactly the information you're looking for. Now, there is an advanced version of Advanced Find, which is, we're going to cover that at convention, and that session will hopefully be made available via video as well. And so when we look at that, that's where we get into some really complex advanced finds, because you can use the tool to do a couple different things. You can use the tool to get a list kind of like this, but maybe the criteria is I need to see all female volunteers who have an email address, who are matched with a child in Big Sisters or Go Girls, and where that child is between the ages of 6 and 14. So you can be really specific about that. And we can get data out of the system from a variety of different points, right? So through the whole training, we've shown you all the different records, right? There's match records, there's match participant records, there are contact records, screening records, programs of interest. Every one of those things we've looked at is an individual record, and every one of them contains data. You can pull data out of the system. Now, there's certainly limitations around how some of those things interconnect with one another, but there are lots of functionality available to be able to take that information out and start to analyze it. And we're going to actually show you a quick example before we wrap up of how you might want to do that. The other thing I want to point out, just to kind of jump off of Advanced Find and into another data finding data information, is how Dynamics can visualize the data for you. So this is really nice, right? We've got it in a nice chart. I see there's 38 people here, but maybe I want to know exactly how many people are part of each ethnic identity, right? Maybe I'm working on a grant for CIC, and I need to break down who we serve and where they're from, right? Where we have such data. So that's really something that you can do with charts. We've got the data here, but a chart will help total this up. I only have so many fingers and toes. I can't count all this and keep this all tracked, and I certainly don't want to have to do it, by tick marks on a piece of paper. That would just take me way too long. And so what we can do is we can build something like this. So I can build the chart that says ethnic identity, right, by ethnic identity national. And if I click on that, it's actually going to break down for me all of the different values. I can make this a bit bigger. And so I now see that 7 are blank. Perhaps we just didn't capture that information. I've got a Métis, African, 10 from Pacific Islands, 13 English Canadian, 5 Middle East, and 1 who actually said I don't disclose it, which is totally within their right? And what's really amazing about charts like this is there's a lot of functionality you can do with this. So I can say, okay, well, that's great, but I really need to see who those people from Pacific Islands are. I didn't realize we had so many. Who are they? Or maybe you need to call them for something, right? Maybe you've got an opportunity through CIC that's only for the people from that area or something like that. These are just random examples I'm picking out of the air. So if I take this column and I click on it, watch what happens to the data on the left. All of a sudden, I'm only looking at people who fit that Pacific Islands demographic. Right? So if I need to narrow down a list and call these people, I've just done it in a matter of clicks. Right? Because I've got the chart built, I've got the list built, I know exactly who I'm looking for, and here's my list. Right? If I click outside of that, it's going to divvy that up. Perhaps I want to look at this again and do that again, but this time I want to say, okay, well, who actually is looking after these files? So I'm going to scroll all the way down to the owner file, and I'm going to build actually a second chart, a bar graph this time, bar graph, and I want to select bar graph and say next. It's actually going to take those 10 people and show me out of those 10 people, I see that 6 of them are user 2 and 4 of them are user 1. So if I have 7 caseworkers, I know that these 2 people handle people, from that, perhaps they run a program for a certain demographic, right, which is pretty common in certain urban areas. And again, I can go back, so I can get out of that, and it'll realign all of the data for me. So this is just one example, right? I can also look at information you can see by inquiry program of interest. So I can see a lot of my volunteers in Big Brothers have emails, not too many in Game On, Girl, or some of the other programs, right? So there's all kinds of function you can use here. Not only do charts help when you're looking at individual data that you already have pulled up, but if you were to change this information, so let's say I want to actually look at all of my contacts, my active contacts. So I change the view. This chart is actually going to refresh, and it's now aligning itself with the data it sees here. So as I change the view, this happens. If I actually turn on a filter and I say, okay, well, I only want those who have a home phone number, the data is going to fade out. I can refresh it. It's now realigned itself with the data that's here. So the value here is really live data, right? When I need to see information, the Dynamics, when you put the information in Dynamics, this is the kind of stuff you can pull out, right, at a glance. And I can assure you, having been around for a long time, we used to count stuff manually. I remember the days when we would open up a filing cabinet because United Way would ask us for some new piece of information, and the only thing we had to do was look through paper files. We'd have to sit down, and I remember days literally sitting on a floor in the office, going through boxes of files, opening up the file, scanning through an application, and saying, oh, this person is this. Check, close the file, grab the next one. Hours of doing that. Now, with a system like this, when you've got that information in the system, then look how quickly we can get access to all kinds of data. But it's really important to remember, and I stressed this a long time, and I'll stress it again, and you'll hear me through other calls talking about this too, consistency is critical. If there's no consistency at your office in terms of what's being put in the system and how it's being entered and what fields you're using, then a lot of what I've just shown you becomes virtually useless, because you can pull all the kinds of stats and information out you want, but if all the data isn't there, then those stats are wrong. And if the stats are wrong, they are utterly and completely useless. Okay, so make sure that you talk about, as a new agency who's just coming onto Dynamics, have those conversations as you move through your process. Right? And if you're a new staff in an agency who's already been using Dynamics, ask those questions to your staff. Right? Your new colleagues, talk to them about where do I get information on what we do and don't use. And if it doesn't exist, suggest that it exists, and talk about what we talked about here in the training session a couple weeks ago or a couple of videos ago around how can we bring some consistency to our use of the system. Okay. There's a quick question about can I show what I clicked on here to open up a chart? So I can definitely do that. I'm going to hide it again. So throughout most of the training, we haven't looked at charts because they're tucked away at the side. You'll notice that they're on the side. Now, in the event that you don't see this charts area on the side, that's because the chart pane option is turned off. So under the ellipsis, there's one of your options in here will be chart pane, and you can put it on the right. You can actually put it up top so it shows up over here like this. Right, so I've got the chart up top and my data on the bottom. Or you can do it as I had it before, put it on the right, or you can turn it right off. It's personal preference. Everybody's different. You may want the data on top, the chart on top, or the data on the side, or whatever you want. Once you've done that, when you open up the chart, you'll see this. Right? So I can open and close it. If I want to see more data in the rows here, I can close the chart. If I want to see the chart itself, I can actually open up the chart. All right? Creating a new chart is the new chart button, which is just the plus. Right? So if I want to build a brand new chart, which you can do very easily, is push the chart. And this is really just a matter of trial and error. So if I want to build a new chart, let's just say I want to count the volunteer boxes. Actually, no, let's count the full name boxes. So I just want to count how many people, and I want to look by district area. Right? So we looked at that a while ago. I don't know if there's any in the system. No, there's not really. So let's go with city. So I want to count up all this. Wow, so that's a pretty busy chart. But you can see just how easily it allows you to filter through, right? I can do all kinds of stuff. I can count people by age. I can count people by course of study if it's entered in the system. I've got it here, right? There's all kinds of stuff that you can filter and chart out on your data here. Now, I'm going to take charts and views one step further, and we're going to roll back to, you've seen a lot of these as we've gone through it, but we haven't really talked a lot about it. These are dashboards. And so a dashboard is a way of bringing all of the information in the system into one window. And so that's really, really handy. One of the things that people often say is, well, it takes a lot of clicks to get somewhere. And so that's true. That's not specific to Dynamics CRM. That's any electronic technological system is going to involve clicking around. And really, I often see clicking around very similar to, if you put all your pages in a file, you got to flip your pages, right? You got to turn stuff. You got to flip over pages and look through that file to find data. It's really no different than clicking the mouse a few times, right? And so in some cases, people will say, wow, it takes a lot of clicks to do that, particularly when you're going to find information. And so I need to see all my screening records, or I want to see how many matches I have. I got to go here, I got to go there. A dashboard eliminates a lot of that because it rolls everything up to one, and you can pull pieces into a dashboard from all different parts of the system. So here's a quick caseworker breakdown view. So this is a good one for a supervisor to use, or a program manager, or an ED, or maybe even if you yourself want to see how many matches are going on in the agency across the board. This will help you with that. So what you can see it's doing here, this is showing me by program and by owner what active matches exist. So you can see a little legend on the right. User 1 is red, 2 is blue, 3 is green. So I can see that all three of us have Big Brother matches. We all have Big Sister matches, but user 1 only has a couple. Okay? Couple matches, there's not very many in our office, and we only have, so there's 2, and it shows me that it's user 2 that's taking care of that. Same with cross-gender, game on, right? These are user 1. So there's lots of at-a-glance functionality here. When you're looking for what are we doing, what are we serving, this is what you can look at. There's also, you can see here's a breakdown of all BBBSC user 1. So again, we're in a training site. There's user 1, 2, and 3. This view here shows me user 1's active matches. Here's user 3's active matches. For some reason, we didn't pick on number 2. There's a bunch of these that exist. So there's some system dashboards. And then I can say, I want to see just my own, right? So these system ones are ones that for now you have access to. Now that's going to change a little bit down the road, but not for some time yet. And so right now, what we're doing is my active matches. I can click on that, and it's going to break down my caseload specifically. And it's going to show me a couple different things. I can see my matches by program, so I can see that I've got a lot of Big Sister matches, quite a few Go Girls matches, and so on. I have a breakdown of my activities due by month. So I can see that in June 2014, I am quite busy, right? I've got 28 contacts. I've got a lot of stuff to do. But as the months roll on and as I get into the fall, which I realize this is probably a little backwards because it's not true, but as you get into the fall, that's usually where things pick up. But in this case, I see things are going to drop down. So why would this be helpful? Here's one really good example. From a workload perspective and a planning perspective, this is virtual gold, right? Because we all know that caseworkers in any nonprofit, especially Big Brothers, Big Sisters, you don't just often do just casework. A lot of times you have other things going on, right? Perhaps you pick up other projects that you're working on. Maybe you help with grants. Maybe you need to, you're working on a program development kit that you want for your agency. Whatever it might be, you have other projects that are sort of extending beyond just casework. This chart right here tells me that, you know what, June, can't do a whole lot extra, right? July, I get a little bit, but I still got quite a bit going on. But August, September, and October, I'm going to have quite a bit more free time. Now, again, training site, I realize that's not realistic because those are usually our busier periods. But from a planning perspective, from an example perspective, this is what I'm talking about, right? Is that you can use this tool to say, you know, October looks really light, and we're not really in a rush for this. I'm going to put this project on hold, and I'm going to set it up and do my project planning in September, so that we can initiate and implement this project in October. We can also get a breakdown here. You can see I've got matches. I've got activities, so I can do all of this. I can see all of the information right from here. And what's really quite handy is right from this screen, I can say, oh, yeah, I got to call him right now. You know, I know he's in today. He said he was around until noon. I'm going to give him a call. Right from my dashboard, I can open up that activity. It's going to load the activity. I can give them a call, complete my match monitoring conversation, do all that stuff, mark it complete. It's going to actually bring me back to my dashboard, where my dashboard will refresh that I've completed that activity, and when I look here, this one would be gone because I've completed it. Okay, so these dashboards and these views and these charts, they are live data, or they're semi-live, I should say. They're mostly live data. Mostly in that when you refresh, so when I leave this and come back, if changes have been made, those changes will be reflected. What it won't do, and it's important to understand this, is if I'm looking at this chart right now, and I'm going to actually go to the agency match dashboard one instead. So let's say I'm looking at this chart about what's happening in the entire agency, right? So my entire office, here's a breakdown of what's going on. It's important to understand that when I'm looking at this, these charts will not change in front of my eyes. They're not going to change as changes are being made, right? So if I'm looking at this and I have 3 other caseworkers who are working away on the system, as they make changes, those aren't visible here. However, if I click refresh list, that data will update, and if a change were made, then this data would reflect that, but only when you refresh. So I either leave this altogether, so I go to contacts and I do some activity, something that I need to work on, or then I go back to dashboard, then it's refreshing itself. As soon as it loads, it's pulling new data. But if I've been staring at this for 20 minutes, it's probably wise for me to say, I'm going to just refresh this. And we're going to refresh this one, just to make sure that if any changes have in fact happened, you're going to capture them. All right. So I want to stick on the idea of reports for a minute, and I'm going to actually get away from this for a moment, and I'm going to open up what's called a dynamic sheet. Now, I'm going to give you this is a very basic example, and so this is you'll notice that I'm on my computer. This is my computer, right? That's my desktop. Those are my children. I can open up something that's on my computer, and I'm stressing that because I am not in Dynamics when I'm doing this. I'm on my computer, and I'm opening a normal Excel spreadsheet. It's mostly normal, however, sorry, that opened on my other screen. It's mostly normal, however, what it's doing is it's actually linked to CRM. So there's a function I'm going to show you, it's one of the last things I show you, is CRM for Outlook. And so CRM for Outlook is a tool that integrates Dynamics CRM right into your Outlook window. It doesn't work for the online version, so if you log in through the portal to access your email, this doesn't work. But if you have Outlook on your computer as a program, like you come into work and you click like this, or you might have an older version, this is CRM, this is Outlook 2013. There's 2010 and 2007, there's other versions out there. So it might not look just like this, but when you open that program that is Outlook, you can install something called CRM for Outlook. It integrates the two. It also keeps me connected to Dynamics at all times. And so why is that valuable? Well, here's one really good example. When I have that set up, it allows me to use this refresh from CRM. So this is a really functional tool, and there's a whole bunch of these reports in the system. I'm going to show you where they are. But here's what happens. When I click this button, you'll notice that, now it's going to take a minute because this is coordinating with my administrator role, so it's pulling on data across the board. But what's happening right now is I've clicked that button, and it's actually going through my CRM for Outlook, and it's reaching into CRM. And so in a minute, down in the bottom right-hand corner, you're going to see something come up down here, and it's going to say connecting to web. There it is. So it's now connecting to the web. So it's actually signing into CRM right now. It's using my Outlook credentials. It's signing into CRM. It's taking the query that I used to build this, so that advanced find that I showed you is what we started with to do this. We built that advanced find. It's taking that advanced find build, applying it to all the data in CRM, collecting all that information, and then it's coming back through that little connection through CRM for Outlook, and it's going to take all that data and it's going to dump it into this spreadsheet. Now again, when you run these, it doesn't take nearly as long as it is right now. It's taking a long time because my role has access. It's looking at all the information, right? So it's looking at activities that belong to me, that belong to sort of all kinds of stuff. Not activities. In this case, it's children served, and we're looking at average ages. But when you run these at the office, your data set is obviously much, much smaller. So this happens way quicker. So connecting to web, and in a second, it's going to then say copying to spreadsheet or something like that. So just wait for it. Come on. I talked over that delay as long as I could, but I only got so much things I can say here. Okay, there we go. So you can see what happened now is all of a sudden my chart came to life. Right? So this spreadsheet that, again, was on my desktop. It was not in CRM. It was on my desktop. It was on my computer. It's been there for weeks. I can open it up whenever I want, and I can refresh from CRM. And when I do that, it's grabbing all the data that meets that criteria as of right now and pulling it into CRM. So now this one is actually one I've built for a demonstration that I'm doing to a global audience for CRM, not Big Brothers Big Sisters, but others. And so it's kind of generic data. And what I'm doing is actually highlighting this feature for them because we use it quite extensively, and we really, really like it because it's got a ton of functionality. What I can do here is I'm looking at the client average age by match year. So this is, again, data from across the country, from across all the matches in all of these years. And you can see that over time, if you look at this just from a trends analytics standpoint, it looks that in the early 2000s, our age was in the 8s. And as we've progressed through the years, we seem to be matching children at an older age, right, as time goes on. Now, we can do a couple things. I've included what's called a slicer here. This allows me to take data from very specific programs, or program types in this case. So I always say, okay, well, this is good, but this is all. I only want to see community-based one-to-one. So if I click that, the data set changes. Now, it was a pretty small change, wasn't very big, but you can see that some of these ones up here got older. If I remove that filter, watch what happens. The data goes back. If I say, let's look at school-based, right? What's the average age of the kids we match in school-based? Quite a drastic change, right? Not only did the years change, but the ages went a little bit younger. Again, I can remove that filter and the data resets. We also look at children by average age by program type, right? So the same idea that we just did, and I can see what all these are, and I can actually filter this right from here. So I can say, I don't want events or other or blanks. I only want these ones that are on the list. I can say, okay, the data will realign, and I can now see that 10.21 years old is the average age for children in community-based one-to-one. Right, so this is actual real data. It's reflective of served last year, although we wouldn't use this nationally. We would pull a different report because this is capped at 10,000 records. For you, that's a non-issue because you won't have that much data or those many records, but nationally we do. So we run these a little bit in a slightly different way because we have more data than we can run through this. Okay, so dynamic reports, there's a bunch of these in the system. I'm just going to close this down and go back into Dynamics. Jump into the reports section. And if you were to go into this right now in the real site or even in the training site and type in the word metrics, anything that's prefaced with the word metrics, it is one of those reports. And so now that I have these up, if I click on any one of these, it's actually going to give me let's do this one, active matches. It actually downloads the spreadsheet for me, and I save that to my computer. I'm going to open it up and refresh from CRM, and this data is sort of generically built. So we built it based on feedback from users and what they would like to see in this kind of report. And so we built it to do just that. And so it may not meet your needs specifically. Perhaps it's something else that you're looking for. But as I do, so here, it loaded on the other screen. So here we go. I can enable, and I could refresh from CRM. I'm not going to because that delay was pretty long, so I'm going to spare you. We've already done it once, but that refresh from CRM. So again, this was pulled out of CRM. It loaded as a spreadsheet. I can save this on my computer, and forevermore, moving forward, I can just refresh the data and use that report. Okay, so that's something that you should look into and ask about at your agency if you're joining an existing agency.
Can you show again how did you go into that spreadsheet? Where to have that spreadsheet come up? Where did you click?
I went to the workplace.
Yeah, the report.
Went into reports. Yep. And then I typed the word metrics because metrics are every one of these reports, when we put them in the system, we preface them by the word metrics just because they do just that. They do break things down from a metric perspective. So they're all metrics dash something. And then you can see there's 16 of them right now. There's a bunch more that I've actually got, a handful more actually created that are going in the system. I just haven't had time to put them in. So there's more of them that are going in.
Okay, and you just click on one and then the spreadsheet.
Yep.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah. When you want to look at this year, actually, Yeah, so see how I clicked it, and then it's downloading the Excel sheet.
Okay.
And if I open it, it just opens that spreadsheet for me.
Okay, great.
And there it is. All right. All right, so just watching the clock here, we're at 10:24, so I just want to be careful of time. The only other thing that I do want to show you is that you have some control over how you see basic layout and basic information in some certain settings in the system. So this is in this, it's called the Set Personal Options. So it doesn't matter where I am in Dynamics. I can be anywhere. I can be on dashboards. You'll notice up in the right-hand corner, I have my name, BBBSE user 2. There's a spot for a picture, and then I've got settings. If I click on settings and click on options, this brings me to a page that gives me control over what I'm seeing, where I'm seeing it, how many records, all kinds of stuff. This is unique to every single one of you. So every person who has a login to Dynamics has access to their own Set Personal Options screen where they can set options just for themselves. We can do all kinds of stuff. So one of the most common changes is people will always leave it on Workplace because, as you probably recall from the first session, you spend the bulk of your time in the workplace. But what they do is they say, well, I really like the dashboards, but when I log in, I really need to be brought directly to my View Edit Matches screen, because when I log in, I need to see that list of matches right away, because that's just what I do, right? That's my thing. I need to log in, and that's what I need to see. So I can set that up just by doing that here. And now moving forward, every time I log into Dynamics, it's going to take me to my View Edit Matches screen. That can be activities, contacts, additional services, whatever part of the system you see here, any of these areas, we can open it up, right? So I'm going to leave it as dashboards because that's a good one for the training. It also allows you to control the records per page. So you might have noticed that when I was going through that process, or any of the training processes, it was always saying at the bottom like one of 250 of 280 records, and that means it's showing me, and I could scroll down and see up to 250 records at a time. You can control that. You can dial that down to 25, 50, 75. If you have a slower internet connection in your office, it is wise to use a lower number, and that's only because the higher the number, the more data CRM needs to pull down every time you go to any grid in CRM, like matches, active contacts. Anytime you go anywhere like that in the system, if you've got it set at 250, that means your internet connection needs to pull all of that data down up to 250 records worth at once. If you set it to 25, that's a lot lighter of a load for the system to be able to carry, and so you'll find that it'll actually respond much faster. The system will be much quicker when it comes to loading that data. Advanced find mode. So there's a bunch of stuff in here. You'll notice there's also a bunch of tabs, right? There's email templates. That's something you might want to look into someday. You can control formats. So that's how do numbers look, how do dates look. You can control the date so that your date format looks like this. By default in the system, it's month, day, year. It's really important that you understand that. The default is month, day, year. You can change it so that it shows up like this, but the system is, by default, it's all numbers, month, day, year, and that can be really confusing for people because as Canadians, we're typically trained that it's actually, we look at it the other way around, day, month, year. And so if you think of a date like April the 5th of 2008, in Dynamics, that's going to be 4/5/2008. But in a Canadian perspective, so to speak, you're going to actually reflect it backwards from that. So it can be really, really confusing because the system is based in the U.S. Logic. So it's something to pay attention to. And you can customize this by clicking this button that says Customize. So from within here, you can actually change your date format, and you can pick from a variety of options. And you can play around. As you pick these, it'll give you a demo of what it looks like, a preview of what it looks like.
Great.
You got email settings that you're going to want to look at, some privacy settings. On the privacy tab, you may want to make sure you pick this one, never send an error report to Microsoft about Dynamics CRM. You could pick always if you want, automatically send it. The challenge is there are error reports that come up. Some of them are because of some of the customizations we have that are a little outside of the box from what Dynamics CRM does, and so sometimes we get those little pop-ups. And if you have it set to ask me for permission, you're going to get this annoying pop-up every time those come up. The solution to that is either automatically send them or never send them. You can tell it was set to never send, which is what we had here. And you can control the language settings. So if your French-speaking staff need the system in French, they can click that. So that is pretty much the overview of sort of some of those extra features. And I'm going to open up for questions, but I want to shut the recording off for the video version of this first. And so that brings that actually brings a close to the entire sort of service delivery introduction to CRM. So there's been 3 sessions in total, and we've talked about effectively everything that you need to know, from putting people in the system, matching them, documentation, the screening stuff, program involvement, and all of that. And then we talked about a lot of the features today. As I said, today was very high level. If there are features that you're interested in, check out the member site. There's lots of stuff there, and if you can't find what you're looking for on the member site, speak to your staff, or of course, by all means, you're welcome to email me at any time. So we are going to get to questions, but for those who are watching the video is going to end in a moment. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to chatting with you about CRM in the future.